Hey there, everybody. It is Mr. Frost coming to you on your Tuesday, although I'm making this video on Saturday. So if you notice this shirt is the same from the overview, that is exactly why. So today I want to talk about the 8 states of consciousness. So as you as you think about consciousness, as we think about what our different kind of modes of being are, this really helps us understand how psychologists classify these different states. So I'll run through these really quick before you move on to the animal video that I think is really awesome from TED Talk. Okay, so our first state is wakefulness. And this is, I always laugh with this girl here because she's like not awake. But this group over here is very awake. This is like the ideal, perfect, wonderful classroom where everyone has the answer to the question. So in wakefulness, we think about high levels of awareness, behavior, and thought. So you're going to see people who are really alert, people who are kind of on task, on focus, and who are really sharp in their thinking. Okay, so if you're really wakeful, that's kind of the ideal super jazz state. And I've had quite a bit of coffee this morning, so I would say that I kind of was a little jazzed. My buzz is starting to go a little down after making that first video, but that's all right. So wakefulness is our very first state. Our second state, which is one of my favorite states, and I know it's one of your favorites, is sleep. Okay, so when we think of sleep, now this is really interesting because these next couple of states are they kind of blend together, but there's some key differences. So with sleep, we're thinking about lower levels of physical activity and sensory awareness. So recognize that I didn't say no levels, right? Lower levels, because what's important to think about is that even when you're asleep, there's a lot of things happening inside of your body and your brain. Okay, they're keeping you breathing, they're keeping your blood flowing. There's a lot of systems that are participating in keeping you alive while you were sleeping, right? And if you remember from the Ralphie video, I don't know if you remember the Magic School Bus one where he was asleep and they're like, there's all this stuff going on. That is true. There's still a whole lot of things happening inside of your body. So even though it's a lower level of activity and a lower level of sensory awareness, there's still some things going on. Okay. And some of you are probably really light sleepers, and you know that the simplest sound or anything can wake you right up. That is an example of a lower level of sensory awareness, not a lack of, right? Sight, touch, hearing, all of those things are still active, they're just lower. Okay, so these are the ones that get a little tricky. So pre-conscious. Whenever you think of the word pre, it's like before, right? Before school, preschool, before you come into kind of traditional school, right? So pre-conscious is when mental events, so things going on in your head, are outside of the current conscious awareness, but they can be brought into consciousness voluntarily. Let me give you an example. So it says remembering here, right? So maybe there's something that happened yesterday and it's not your current focus, right? It's not on your mind right now. However, it can be easily brought into your mind by you wanting to remember. So you're working in class and you start to think and you're like, oh, this girl was really mean to me yesterday. And they start to bring the event back to your mind. That event was in your pre-conscious, because while it's not your current focus of attention, it can easily be brought to your focus of attention. Okay, that's that pre-conscious state where something's not quite on your mind yet, but it's kind of outside of the current awareness, but it can be brought back into consciousness really easily. So think of awareness as well as you think about these different states of consciousness. Then we have non-conscious. So these are when mental processing occurs outside of conscious awareness. This is similar to what I was just talking about with sleep, where there's still these activities happening. Okay, so your brain is still conducting your heart rate, your temperature, your breathing. It's still doing those things. However, you are not conscious of those things, right? You're not thinking about, oh, right now my brain is controlling the rate of my heart, right? You just don't think about it, but it's happening. Okay, your brain is still doing it. It's still an activity that's happening. It's just not on your mind right now. Okay, so it's not unconscious, it's non-conscious. But unconscious is a complete lack of awareness. Okay, so think about these comparisons where we're hearing lower levels of awareness, we're hearing not in current awareness, whereas unconscious is a complete lack of awareness. Okay, If you think of anesthesia, for example, drug-induced anesthesia, that is an example of being unconscious. Okay, and as we talk about our earlier minds in psychology, Sigmund Freud thought that the unconscious was a place where we put like sexual or aggressive urges. He thought that we hid them in our unconscious, and it was a safe place for us to put them because they weren't acceptable in society or to talk about with other people. So that's unconscious. Then we have hypnosis. Hypnosis is interesting. So this is a state of self-focus. So you're kind of bringing focus into yourself, and there's little attention given to the external kind of environment. Now, I said here we'll have a later day dedicated to hypnosis. We probably still will because I think it's fascinating. What's interesting is there's a lot of studies about suggestibility, whereas you can't be hypnotized if you're not open to being hypnotized, and that's really a mental thing. We'll talk about that later. So it's kind of self-focused, but you're giving little attention to things outside, right? External stimuli is like a sound or a smell or a feeling, okay? Then we have meditation, and meditation is when you're just thinking about one target. So breathing, for example, you just focus in and you're honing in on your breathing. How much am I breathing? What's the rate of my breathing, right? Where do I feel my breath coming into and going out of? And the goal is to increase your awareness, but also to kind of get that sense of peace, right? To kind of just have that being in the moment, pushing everything out and focusing on that one singular thing. It's helping you come into center, okay, and bringing about peace because you're shutting out all the noise and all the extra stuff. Then we have psychoactive drugs, and we'll have a couple days dedicated to drugs because there's different categories. But these are chemicals that act upon your central nervous system. So we should be really good about knowing what the central nervous system is now. And what we often see is changes in mood, perception, and behavior. What's really fascinating about drugs is that when they come into your body, they replace, right? They mimic or replace regular neurotransmitters. So remember we talked about GABA and dopamine and acetylcholine. Drugs come in and they replace those or they mimic those, and that causes some problems. But again, we'll go over that a little more in detail. Now, let me try to put this all into perspective. As we think about, okay, what does this mean? What are these states of consciousness? What's their value to my knowledge? Ultimately, these states of consciousness play a bigger role in understanding the benefits of meditation and understanding the harm of drugs. In order to get to that understanding, which we'll push to later, it's really important to build a foundation on these various states of consciousness, because these are the states that we'll go in and out of in order to kind of achieve different goals. Consider a doctor. It's pretty important for them to know the state of consciousness that their patient is in before they do a procedure, right? Come on, thank you, anesthesia, right? If you're having a really, really serious surgery, you probably don't want to be awake during that. If we want to really understand the impact of drugs, we have to understand the states of consciousness, okay? So these serve as a foundation for us understanding sleep better, for us understanding drugs better, and for us understanding humans better, right? To know these different states that our brain goes in and out of and what's happening inside of each of those states. So that's kind of the foundation for why this is important knowledge, and it'll help us build on what we talk about later. So on the weekly schedule, there is a hyperlink to a States of Consciousness project. It's a fun project. You have some extra time and just kind of want to fool around and expand a little more. It's not like super rigorous. It's just a cool little activity that I used last semester, and it helps you get on the creative side. So that is today's video. There's another link in the activity spot for you, and I will see you tomorrow.